scratches on his
You go?
No, give me some leg room here.
and the stroke.
Now you can see where you are here. Too.
You good?
Yeah, we're good to go.
I'll monitor from here to make sure.
All right, you control this. All right, so where did we leave off? We left off at
Witnesses can be accused too. The witness can be judged too. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, this is the old video.
All right, so we left off. I don't know where exactly where we left off, but we were saying that you got anything that the society deems is a crime and isn't something that would be contrary to Sharia is going to be a crime, okay? And they're going to have a limit on how they could punish, but the punishment itself will be called ta'zir or discretionary, okay? Now, why are we saying this? I'm saying this because there are some people, and some women have heard, apparently, that no form of abuse will ever go punished except if there are 4 witnesses to it. Now, in an issue like sexual abuse, you're not going to have 4 witnesses, obviously, because people do that in private, right? They do it when there's only 2 people, which is also why we understand now that the Prophet ﷺ said a man and a woman should not be alone in a room, even if he's teaching the Quran, and even if it is Maryam bint Imran as-Siddiqa, okay? Even if it's the Virgin Mary and someone's teaching her the Quran or she's teaching the Quran to someone, right? They shouldn't be alone in a room. So now you understand that, and people sort of questioned that in the past and thought it was extreme. You actually can understand exactly that people are doing this now. They no longer want to be alone in a room with someone for other reasons, like executives don't want to get sued, doctors don't want to get sued, dentists, right, don't want to get sued. So it's the same thing, though. Essentially, it's the same thing. Okay. So the issue is that if there are witnesses to abuse or multiple people claiming an abuse, okay. So who was the Hollywood guy? Harvey Weinstein. It's mutawatir in that respect. Okay. It's mutawatir in that respect. So at that point, yes, Qadi could do something. He's not going to give the guy 40 lashes or give him head punishment, but yeah, he could do something if it's mutawatir, it's widespread, and there are witnesses, and all the women or the victims are coming out. They're not related. They don't know one another, okay? And yet they're still bringing the same story or the same basic idea, like what Cosby went through, like what Harvey Weinstein went through, okay, or did, and the types of witnesses that came forth for him. So that could go and be prosecuted. It's not going to be prosecuted with a had, right? But it still would be a case, and a qadi could look at it. And this is just because someone came up to me recently and thought or told me that other people think and imagine that if there are no 4 witnesses, then there will be no justice or no action taken. Okay? And that they can't say anything. Now here's the difference. There's a big difference between reporting something to the police and publicly making an accusation. There's a big difference. So you could report something to the police, okay? It's very different from making a public accusation. Public accusations against people without evidence, okay? This is, and that's I think what Imam Zayd was talking about, because I wasn't online, okay? At that period of time, I was busy, so I was offline. But I happened to be with Imam Zayd at that time. Like, we were literally together, probably in the few days that he wrote his post, which everyone got upset about. Okay? And all he was trying to tell me was that he was really concerned and alarmed by the idea of Muslims supporting this concept of just accusing someone, all right, publicly without any evidence. That's what he told me, right? And that, to me, that's fine, right? I mean, we do agree with that premise, that basic idea. However, something could be reported to the police, right? That there's nothing wrong with, because you're not going publicly and saying something that doesn't have any evidence, because all you do is you create a he said, she said, right, type of division between people. All right. So, what do you got to say on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you talked about publicly accusing someone. You talked about reporting to the police. What about similar to the case that Imam Zaid was talking about, where you go and you accuse someone in court, or like the trial, like the Senate hearings that were going on, which isn't exactly a court, but it kind of operates almost as a tribunal to see if the guy gets the job. Does that count as an accusation without enough witnesses, or is that?
Yeah, that would count as a public accusation, right? That's a public accusation.
But then, like, how could you? Yeah, but then how would you ever, like, how would you ever get justice for that?
You would get justice by reporting it to the police, and once the police have received multiple reports, right?
But the police won't do anything unless they have enough evidence to say, okay, we can prove beyond 99% doubt that this.
Okay, so how was Harvey Weinstein being? How was he?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
So there's gotta be a level where, if there are multiple accusers who have nothing to do with one another, who don't know one another, right, and their story is the same story, and usually these people act in the same way. For example, the NBC guy, I always forget these people's names. What's the NBC guy who got from the Today Show? Matt Lauer. Okay, so Matt Lauer's case was that he was so famous in the world, like he couldn't do the zina that he wanted to do in public. Like he couldn't go find a woman in or not in public. I mean, outside of his home or workplace, because he was so famous, right? So he had to do it in his job. So these people, they have a repeat cycle. Most offenders like this, they have a habit and a pattern because they live their regular life, and they could only wiggle out a certain spot in their regular everyday life where they do their abuse, right? So Matt Lauer, it was at work. Harvey Weinstein, it was during the interview process or whatever, someone to get a job. Bill Cosby was the same thing. He had a typical pattern, right? He had a repeat pattern where he basically would just take the people upstairs to his room and drug them. So if those stories all pan out, and they're all separate to the point that the women don't know one another, I'm telling you, and there's nothing, I haven't seen anything in the books, but knowing the basics of Sharia, there can be action taken on that, right? There can be action taken just on that. There's no way that could just be left.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
So from my understanding, the idea of like when you accuse someone, you bring 4 witnesses. That's me. Say I'm accusing another person of doing something wrong, right? Yeah. And I have to bring 4 witnesses for my accusation to stick, right? To establish that there's truth. But in this
in certain cases, 4 witnesses.
Yeah. So like in situations of sexual abuse, typically it's not a third person; it's the victim. Right. Who's alleging. She's not bringing false accusations. She knows it happened. For her, it's an absolute fact. Yeah. Right. That this happened. Right. So she's bringing an allegation that this guy raped me. Yeah. Right. So for her, it's an absolute fact. She's not slinging accusations. So I think that's a little bit factually different than me bringing.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. But in terms of when if someone is to label someone as the victim, right, then you need at least a piece of evidence, secondary evidence. Right? Yeah,
well, for someone to be found guilty. Yeah. Right, but like, isn't the entire court process it's there to establish guilt or innocence? Yeah. So like, if a person brings an accusation, like similar to like say what happened in the recent Supreme Court hearings, right? Mm-hmm. The first lady, she brought allegations saying that I was abused, right? And then after that, a few more women came out. Yeah. Right, I'm saying that he did it to me too, or I saw him do this kind of behavior that part of possible to make it a little bit louder. Okay, so yeah, so other people came out saying, I saw behavior from this man which was consistent with the allegation that of sexual abuse or different things, giving circumstantial support to it. So her thing wasn't so much let me just lay accusations to him. Yeah. Let me bring my story out because she was harmed by this, right?
Yeah, in the actual specific case of Dr. Ford, she didn't really appear at all to be slinging an accusation. Right. Like, she appeared totally genuine. And I think I haven't heard a single person, maybe some of his supporters, but I haven't heard a single person put a doubt, besides Trump, who went off and gave a speech, right, and said, well, she doesn't remember anything, but she really didn't look like she was just slinging an accusation for fun, right? But like you said, like you still, technically speaking, okay, you still need something to make someone guilty, right? And by the way, a sister asked, like, if you can't make someone guilty on the earth, then will they be found guilty in the sight of Allah? Well, obviously, Allah knows and Allah sees, and Allah doesn't need any witnesses. And I'm saying that because some people actually do imagine that no justice will be had if there are no witnesses. Well, if you're a mu'min and you believe in the akhirah, yeah, you will get justice in the afterlife, right? And just because someone is not found guilty does not mean they're innocent. And they have to understand, people have to understand that too, because it's also imagined or thought that just because when we say the word that there's no evidence means that we don't believe you, right? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he had a reverse case where a man, he was a dark-skinned man. Mm-hmm. She was a he was a brown-haired man married to a very dark woman in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes in and he accuses her. Okay, he tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I came home and I saw my wife sleeping with another man, and the man is so and so, and that man was known and famous for having red hair, right? He was of a reddish complexion. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam grew angry, okay, and said, we'll see what happens when the baby comes out. However, do you have 4 witnesses? He said, no, I don't have 4 witnesses. He became angry. And then he told the Sahaba, he said, if she gives birth to a red-haired baby, right, and he made a dua against her, right? But he told the man, you have no recourse. There's nothing you can do, right? There's nothing you can do because you didn't have the evidence. So he believed the man, but he knew that he couldn't he couldn't do anything about it. And then the baby came out with reddish hair, right? So he separated between the husband and the wife, because once you accuse your wife or vice versa, you can't be married anymore, right? So that's how huge an accusation is. So for people to understand that just because in any situation where you're saying there's not enough evidence does not mean we don't believe the person, right? Because think of how traumatic it is when you get victimized and then no one believes you, right? So, and especially like your family, right? You got to expect your family to believe you if you get victimized. However, that's one thing, and the actual finding of someone to be guilty is another thing, and that's exactly why the whole issue of sexual abuse is so bad, because it's so easy to get away with. That's the problem.
So what should, say, Muslim women do? Because it happens in our community too. Mm-hmm. Right? People who are victims of sexual abuse. What recourse do they have? Because chances are they don't have witnesses, mm-hmm. right? Chances are it's usually a close family member, or a close friend, or someone who they confide in, or someone close who commits the action. So what recourse do they have to getting justice for what happened to them?
See, that's the thing. We're talking just theoretically and ideally. Okay?
Right, of course.
Theoretically and ideally, I think that as soon as something like this happens, it should be logged, right? And the log should be a national log, not a local police log, right? So you report it to the local police, but then it gets logged with a federal thing, mm-hmm. nationwide, right? Because you can't expect local police to be corroborating. People move around and do these things in different states, right? And then a person, if now multiple accusations are coming upon a person, and you have a federal log, right? And now you have 2 and 3 and 4 in different states. Now you can take action, right? You can actually call in these look at these allegations and measure them against each other. The witnesses don't know each other. They're reporting the same thing. How is this, right? Obviously something went on, and some kind of ta'zir or discretionary punishment is put down on the person, right? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, how else are you going to do it?
Yeah, which is like why it's such a serious issue, and like a lot of times the only recourse I guess that people have is going public, right?
Well, that's a problem. If you didn't have a system,
right.
And I don't know if there was a system in place. There might be, but just think about it. Think about what I'm saying. I think it makes total sense. You should have a nationwide registry, basically. Anytime someone does an act of sexual abuse, right, you report it. The report by itself, a single report, right, doesn't do anything, right? Because I can make up a single report, right? Anyone can make up a single report. We're not saying, right? It could happen. A second report now in a different location, a flag should go up. A third report in a third location, or even in a second and a third and a fourth report in the same location, the person should be flagged. He should be flagged, right? And these reports should be totally private because women don't want to report to the HR because they don't want to lose their job. Well, what's the HR going to do anyway, right? They can't prosecute. So you're in the sphere of the superior. So Matt Lauer, no one wants to go against him because he's more important than the HR, right? The guy was making $25 million a year. If he gets upset with someone in HR, right? Who's more important to NBC? But if you have it that, let's say, just your fingerprint or just some anonymous piece of information that links the one making the allegation and the testimony, so that there's not even a fear that her name will leak out as accusing the guy. Okay? And then now it's in the registry. It's in his registry. He has a registry. And he should be informed you have a registry. Okay? And I don't know, maybe informing him or not. It might actually you don't inform him because that might jeopardize the girl who was just victimized. Okay? Because he'll know that you just ratted me out. Okay? And he might get more violent. So it's anonymous in that it's not totally anonymous in that there's some piece of information linking the person to the account, to the testimony, and then they just monitor it. If a second one comes out, a third one comes out, and a fourth one comes out, then you have an investigation, right? And at the very least, think about it. I mean, if these people do this stuff, I don't think that anyone does this stuff one time. I really don't. There are certain things you don't do once in life, you know? There's certain things, it's just part of your behavior. You're like a repeat type of person, right? And I think this is one of them. This is one of the things, the behaviors that people repeat over and over. And now here's the worst thing. The worst thing is when it's in the house to a minor and the guy is just picking on the same girl. And that happens a lot between a man and his stepdaughter, right? And more disgustingly, it could be a man and his niece or his daughter herself. Now, this is something where you need something beyond police. Like, there's no way to police these things because some people are actually sexually abusing minors, like 9 and 8 and 9-year-old stepdaughters, right? And by the way, the punishment of rape is the punishment of zina. And in some books I read that it's qatl.
Yeah, qadi
ayad. Rape is punishable by death, right? Just as if you stick someone up for their money, that's punishable by death. Right. Like if I beat you up with my bare hands, okay, and take your money, that's theft.
Well, in this case, you took something else.
Yeah. You took something way more valuable, right? But so if I actually threaten you with words and with my hands for money, it's not punishable by death. Right. But if I take out a weapon, or if I brandish a weapon and ask you for your money, right? So what is that? That's punishable by death. So that's basically, I'm taking something valuable from you by use of force. Well, what's more valuable? Money or like a woman's like privacy and dignity and all that stuff. So Qadi Ayad of the Maliki school said that that's punishable by death. Okay? That rape is punishable by death. Sexual abuse doesn't always have to be rape, right? It could be less than that, but it's still as traumatic. It's still traumatic, right? So that I don't see a solution. Do you see a solution for like stepfathers and girls? And usually no one knows about this until she's like 18, right? Or she comes out with it.
I don't know about a solution for that, but I mean, one thing, and was a point that I was gonna make, and I think Ali over here made the same point here, is that, summarizing what he said, sort of like these are two different systems we're talking about, the Sharia and things in the U.S., right? And in many cases, the system we have here is a system of dhulm, of oppression. So now we're kind of like mixing and matching two different things. So the system itself isn't going to do much for you.
Well, here's the thing.
So like if everything is set up right, like why do women not go to the police, right? Because in many cases, there's not even an investigation. Nothing even happens, right? So and then on top of that, everybody looks at her and accuses her and, lashes out at her. So what's the incentive? In the right system, I think at the very least an investigation would take place and we would see if there is substantial evidence. So I think the first point is the system itself, the whole thing is wrong. Right? And that's why
we have Hamza here.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what... No, because Ali, just a phrase for people to say. Ali says, okay, neutral question for the sake of discussion. I'm just getting a kick on Murad Othman. If a facet comes to us with information, we have been ordered to verify it.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Okay, now let's look at this before we address the other comment. For the sake of discussion, is it not problematic that we are discussing the Islamic Sharia ruling on this matter when it is not an Islamic court?
Right.
No, we're actually not, because we're saying if we were to provide if we were to contribute a commentary on the status quo, this is what we would put forth. Based on our principles, but nothing that we've said so far is revelation based only. All that we said so far is maqul al-mana, right? It's rationally comprehensible. That you get, it's based on our principles, but these principles are all rationally comprehensible. So they're not exclusive to revelation, right? So we're not here advocating for lashes on someone, right? Which would be something that is revelation based, right? We're advocating and we're saying something that is completely rationally comprehensible. Now, what the punishment would be, maybe we differ on that, because we do have in Sharia an issue with jail. Jail is not totally out of the picture, right? But we do have an issue with jail, okay? Because it does upset other things and does a dhulm in another sphere. But the issue is that I really see that this makes total sense, and I don't know what the law is, but you have a national registry, because apparently this whole thing is an epidemic, and even in Muslim homes, okay? Even in Muslim homes. It's an epidemic. In the country, you have a national registry where women can anonymously, but with a connection to their identity, right? There has to be a connection, because once this number, how do you know one accusation from the next? You need to, and she could repeat. If she was accused on Monday, and then accused next Monday, she could file it again with all the details of the report, right? But at some point, when they do an investigation, they've got to be able to contact the witnesses. And they can keep her name anonymous the whole time, but they need to have a way through social security number or through some other way to contact the person and say, hey, it's been 10 years since you made your accusation. In the past 10 years, 15 other people have made accusations, so now we're coming to privately, nothing public, we will privately discuss your allegations, right, in an interview, okay? That is completely, in a sense, private, not going to go public. You're not going to be asked to take the stand, okay? If you remember that doctor from Michigan, he was the most disgusting one.
Oh, the gymnastics.
Yeah, the gymnastics guy. I mean, it was the same thing. That's why I said all these guys have a pattern.
Yeah.
And they have a habit. You check her on the board, right? He's doing a checkup. He asked her to lay down on the board, whatever the medical table, right? And then he goes on. And sometimes it was like a 12-year-old girl. The mom is right there, right? The mom was right there. But he had a medical towel, and he's like, I just have to check and make sure everything's okay. The mom is right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what the worst thing in that was? Even the parents, even when the kids told them what happened.
Yeah, they shut them down.
Yeah,
that's why I'm saying you can't go to family on these things. You're just gonna divide them, right? You gotta go to an anonymous source of agents. Yeah.
So, one point, like, even with that, right, I think there should be some kind of policy where there's some sort of investigation, even if it's one accuser, because a lot of times you can find other types of evidence to prove rape, like, certain medical things. I'm not sure the exact details, but there are ways to prove it, that something happened. So I think as soon as there's, I'm not saying convict the guy automatically, but there's got to be some middle path where, someone accuses, all right, let's hear you out, like, what happened? And I'm sure there's, like, all kinds of ways you can go about establishing evidence. So, not even waiting for a few to come out, even the first one.
Actually,
do an investigation if you can find something.
Well, that's a good point. Well, here's the thing. One of the things they could do is, the reason I never put that is that when there's an accusation like that, I think that in this theoretical system that we've thought up, because the agency, the National Sex Abuse Hotline or agency, whatever it is, that's what they got to create. They should wait some time, because if they pick up the next week and say we need to talk to you, that would tip him off of who's accused. Now, if that's a daughter or a stepdaughter, then he could turn violent on her, right? So you got to. I would say you have to think of that. We would have to think of that, because think about this. Why is no one talking? None of the women were talking. They're afraid of something.
Yeah.
So if they're afraid that the person will just get violent on them, then you have to wait some period of time.
Well, then maybe you just track what happens later, because then if he gets violent, then that's another, that's something that he can get convicted for.
Well,
so then so then he'll get on that. So then, I mean, like, as soon as the investigation happens, even after that, keep tabs, like, see what's happening. And you keep that door open. So, like, let's say he does get violent on her, right?
Yeah.
But they weren't able to establish enough evidence. Mm-hmm. But, if he gets violent on her, maybe they can find something then. Bruises, whatever it is.
Well, he'd be just adding to his record.
Yeah, but then on that, even if you can't convict him on the sexual abuse, you convict him on violence, and he's still, there's still justice there.
But here's the thing: there are a lot of other forms of violence that are not physical, and a lot of these people, they do this, right? And they'll turn the whole family against them. All right. So let's. Can you go to the questions, because they can't really see them?
Yeah.
Should we just, if we click on this, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, and you mind if I make a quick point?
Yeah.
So for all the people out there who feel the need to be Facebook muftis, should really stop. Like you said before, with people going around saying, you need 4 witnesses this to even whatever, right? These things are very intricate and in-depth, and it should be left to the specialists in the field. As a community, we need to respect specialization, and people really need to fear Allah and not speak about the Sharia things that they don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, if you're aware of something in Sharia, you might be aware of a thing without being aware of everything else. That's why you have to have some kind of pure discussion on these things. Now, Saddam Akbar says, referring to the story of the kid with the reddish hair, was this man and women given punishment? They weren't. There was no evidence, but they were separated. Okay, extending this into the modern day situation, can evidence from rape is different from zina. It's a different crime. You don't need 4 witnesses for rape. Yeah. It's a different crime. Okay? It is a different crime. Okay? Secondary evidence, it could be. Secondary evidence could be enough. Yeah, I would have to look into the books of fiqh on that. But zina and rape are different. The issue of rape has to do with safety. The issue of zina has to do with public decency.
Right.
So someone said, "Oh, what's the point of the 4 witnesses?" Because the crime against society is not when 2 people do their zina alone. It's when they're so open and so public about it that they're corrupting society, like pornography, where they want everyone to see this. They are so loose about it that they're doing that. Penetration is witnessable, right? Can be witnessed by themselves or by 4 people. Okay, so it's an issue of public indecency. All right, so or beyond public indecency, corruption of the public. All right, so that's why rape and zina are 2 separate crimes. All right, Ali says, in terms of family, would a form of sexual education be necessary? We have heard people who say that children should be taught no means no, but for our own community, what are the parameters for us to have the discussion with our kids about dignity, sex, the rights of men and women in their respective relationships.
Don't be in khalwa.
You do. You have to teach this stuff. A couple things. I mean, once people get older in the family, they have to be taught to keep their hands on to themselves. Certain things should stop being things, right? Like certain cousins, for example, and what they do with their younger cousins. You have a 17 and a 7-year-old, right? Well, I mean, you got to learn to people have to learn to have limits. And in Maliki fiqh, you know that after 2 years old, you can't touch a girl. So, like, if there's a 6-year-old neighbor, I can't go give her a hug, right? I can't like pat her on the back. 2 years old in the Maliki school, you can't touch a girl. Unbelievable. If it's not your daughter or your niece, okay. And this idea of we're just of cousins as well. Well, how do we know that I'm sure this stuff happens with cousins all the time. Cousins doesn't mean that they have no desire for one another. I mean, who said that? So that is an issue as well. Abdul Aziz Suraqa, Sheikh Abdul Aziz Suraqa, if you have anything to add to this, because this is sort of one of those discussions where fiqh is involved. Right? I don't know if you've heard much, but it's one of those things that if you have something to say, please do say it. Right, and share it. We're talking basically here about, for those just joining, what in our perspective from the education of the Sharia, what would we put forth? And Hamza, what is the law right now on this issue? Do you know?
On sexual abuse?
Yeah.
I don't know what the law is, but obviously it's not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, I mean, the suggestion I'm making here, to me, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, basically, like for any criminal charge or anything to stick, you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to prove it beyond 99% chance that it happened, which is a very insurmountable barrier when it comes to things like sexual abuse.
Totally.
Like
unless you have 18 or 20.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Unless you have something crazy like that.
Yeah.
I don't know the specifics of the Harvey Weinstein situation.
Well, one of the things about Harvey Weinstein is he's not even pleading innocent, is he?
I have no idea.
The thing is about a lot of these guys, like Matt Lauer didn't plead that he was innocent. The guy, the Michigan gymnastics, the physician, he never pled that he pled guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Harvey Weinstein pled that he was innocent, right? He didn't plead innocent. So once these numbers rack up, right, you still have a problem, and that's what you pointed to, was like, well, that means a guy knows that he has like up to 10.
Right.
Right? So there has to be some kind of pressure put on a person that he should be given a message that you're now being observed in a sense. Not, obviously not, we're on that something's going on. Okay? While the identity of the people making the allegations is protected. Okay? So he'll obviously know who's ratting him out. Right? So...
I think I might have skipped over some.
We skipped some. Well, Khalid ibn Walid Raza is saying Ali because one of the brother.
Oh, he's just trolling. I know Khalid. He's just trolling.
What is he saying?
They're like in a little conversation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're being monitored.
Yeah. Basically,
we got Murad to monitor them.
Yeah, basically the idea is if you got reported in this registry.
Yeah.
Okay. Then at some point you get a phone call, right? You get a call you get a call or a visit. I mean, a visit, that would be too many. It'd be like 100 million people getting visits in America, right? You get a communique. Goes straight to you, not in the mail that anyone else could open. Straight to you, okay, without anyone knowing, right? You have been basically reported, right? This is the report. Okay, and I think people would start taking the issue seriously. Right, this will probably create a lot of jobs. This registry, because apparently this is a massive epidemic, and we apparently have a seriously disgusting. Okay, well that's what we're saying. Murad Uthman is saying, or people could file complaints. That's what we're saying. We're saying the woman files a complaint without her name, just like a number or some other identity thing that later on, if they need to contact her, they could contact her. She files the report, okay, and then it's there, and then you start monitoring after that.
I think there's also another thing that people neglect to speak about, and it's kind of like a big elephant in the room, and it's an issue of the culture here, where people going to bars and different parties and stuff, and there's all this alcohol and all this pre-mixing and all of this, all these sexual actions happening, and people don't know where the line is. People get a little bit drunk, and then things happen, right?
Yeah.
That definitely contributes to a lot of it. Like, where are these things happening?
No, alcohol,
in many cases,
is a huge
it's at these
issue,
kind of places, and also
right.
if that was cut out too, I think a lot of these cases, even with the whole thing with Kavanaugh, like where were these things happening? At parties.
Yeah, alcohol,
right?
Alcohol is always involved.
Well, here's a question. Murad is saying this could also be abused. Yeah, it can be abused. That's what we're saying. There's not going to be a conviction.
Yeah. We just do
one. There's not going to be a conviction on one thing, right? You can't even convict on 3. You need a beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? So if it's mutawatir, like 20 separate people, right? And over time they'll probably come up with a number or whatever, right? Who's this Cilantro Alfred Magnifico? Who is the handsome man on the right wearing headphones?
You got to admire.
Shout out Arslan.
Do you know this person?
Yeah, it's one of my friends.
Okay. All right, so listen. So you're not going to have a conviction on 1. You're not going to have a conviction on 2. And just the idea that this agent calls or contacts the person, says you had a complaint filed against you, that's not an accusation. It's not even an accusation, a legal accusation. It's not a prosecution. It's just you're now being informed that you have a record, and maybe that would, put the guy on watch.
Yeah, no, I think many people conflate complaints with convictions.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And that's an issue. That's where all this conversation about even you have to have 4 witnesses to even be able to say something like that. I feel like that's an issue that people need to distinguish in their minds.
Now another question: can't these things be proved through DNA testing and other things?
Well, I'm
not too sure about
going back in the past. I don't know if you can.
Well, where you live today.
Well, here's the thing.
Like today.
No. I mean, like if it happened 6 months ago, what are you gonna do?
So what if it happens like that second, right? Like, are there things that can be done?
Well, there even that
medically speaking,
you would have to have a specific type of DNA because a specific. For example, if it's a stepfather, right? You know how easy it is to get a piece of his DNA, like a nail clipping or a piece of hair, right? Would be sufficient. So that won't work. Mm-hmm. But I would say, if she has an issue, she should come forth with her thing and send everything that she possibly could.
Right, and then if you can prove it using that...
Yeah, then you just keep that in a file. Okay? Keep that in a file, and then you see what happens over time. All right, so Khalid bin Walid says, issue with DNA is, what is the guy accused of?
Oh, okay, I see.
Hey, listen. The accusation can go both ways.
But then isn't there a way to see if he was violently going in?
Huh?
Isn't there a way to see if he was violently going in on her? That's the thing. I'm not sure to what extent these things are.
I know,
I just don't know anything.
You can look at traces of injuries and things like that.
I'm looking at the most impossible type of sexual abuse to prove, right? Who are these fools that you guys are friends with? Cilantro Alfred Magnifico. Just the name. I'm not even reading this, okay? Named himself after a vegetable for the salad, okay? And he thinks he's magnificent. He wants to talk about McGregor. We're talking about something serious, and this guy is giving some dopey comments. And we're talking about a serious topic. So this dope over here is talking about Khabib and McGregor's... Is he serious or what?
I don't know.
I think it was appropriate, but we can go back to.
I mean,
I'm just gonna slide that out.
Aren't we talking about? I think he is serious.
No, I don't think he is. He's trolling.
He's trolling
from an Islamic perspective.
Because he's being dopey. We're trying to talk about a serious subject, and he's asking about. All right, we'll get to your McGregor thing because I don't even know what happened in the first place, but we'll get to that in a second. But we're talking about something serious here, which is that we're trying to come up with ideas. And where did these ideas come from? Okay, so where do these? He's not trolling. Okay. All right. Cilantro says he's not trolling. Okay. The whole account is a troll if it's named after a salad or whatever. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to the issue here. which is that what I'm looking at is the most easy to hide type of sexual abuse, right? Groping, right? A guy gropes a woman, okay? Impossible. There's no evidence, right?
That's the issue.
Unless if there's no eyewitnesses, okay?
But,
So that's what I'm saying. I'm taking that and saying, well, yeah, you could, eventually, if this guy has received complaints, this many complaints from women who don't know each other, right? It'll take years, right? But it's something is better than nothing. It'll take years, but you will eventually have something. So that's the idea.
I guess we're not gonna find the solution on a podcast, but it is an idea to throw out. Yeah,
I mean how to implement that, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's just something that seems like it's common sense. I wish we had Alex here to give us his take.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's look at what some of these other people are saying.
But a quick point: I think it is important that we do initiate the discussion at least.
Yeah,
I think that's the important.
It's important to take the issue seriously, and in practicality, it's important to take accusers seriously too.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some questions here. Levon Brown says, one must keep in mind context. There are demographics of the population that are already profiled and monitored for crimes.
This is a good point.
So there must be a watchdog to ensure that such things don't show. Now, he's saying the pattern of racism. Now, here's the thing. That's why I'm saying that the idea of accusers being people who don't know one another strengthens the case, right? Right, strengthens the case.
Yeah, well, I think what he's talking about is your idea of creating like a registry.
Yeah.
And the discretion on whether to prosecute or not or take action would lie with the government.
Yeah.
Right? It wouldn't lie with the individual accusers.
Well,
So what he's talking about, I think, is if the government decides that okay, we're going to take this threat more seriously because it's a white girl accusing a black guy.
Well,
right?
well, here's the thing. You have anonymity. You don't know anything about the accuser. You have like a number. Obviously, they could look it up, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. You have a type of anonymity because you want to remove as many bias factors as possible, right? You want to remove all those as possible. So, to the agent, he gets a number, right? He sees a number. He doesn't see that whether it's a rich person or a poor person.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, all right. Now, Khalid bin Walid Reza says Islam is, of course, yeah, we know that. That's why we have the whole organization, right? But, and I'm not being facetious, but yeah, that's easy to say. Well, it's alcohol, obviously, is the problem, and the deen. Yeah. Yes, of course, we know that.
Well, I think in a perfect situation, we could flesh a lot of things out a lot better if the entire system was right.
And here's the thing: he's right about this because he's saying we should look at what we have in our Sharia.
Yeah.
And so many people out there, right? When you ask the question, well, what does Allah and His Messenger say about this? That's what he's right about. They should have some more confidence because, especially, and you're in the field, right? Muslims in law, right? They oftentimes have a very almost low opinion.
Right.
Am I right about that?
What do you mean?
They have of Sharia. They either are very ignorant on it, or they actually view it as something to be embarrassed about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
they're very arrogant.
Yeah, because people are. I think anyone who's embarrassed is ignorant, and don't know the power of and the expansiveness of the system that we have. Because in reality, it's far superior to the American legal system and the legal system.
Yeah.
And you got to keep in mind, if you take out khalwa, you take out alcohol, you take out so many things. I mean, that takes the percentage of of things a lot lower. So then the amount of things to sift through becomes a lot less and easier to.
Yeah, I totally think that in families, like big families, the issue of khalwa has to be observed. I don't care who it is. Let's say if it's you're no matter who it is, when you have people who are almost defenseless, they have to observe that. It's got to be observed.
Yeah.
The issue of khalwa and masajid. Our whole masjid is CCTV'd.
Right.
The whole masjid.
Yeah, that's smart.
CCTV.
Yeah. Even in my dad's office, we have a camera.
Yeah.
Always playing.
Yeah,
because you don't know what can happen.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, you have to take your precautions and you just never know what can happen.
Also, I do think it's important for discussions like this.
Yeah.
To have female input. because like a lot of times as men we can be tone deaf to a lot of things.
That's true. There might be some things that we overlook.
Yeah, and like societal barriers, even like for example, like we may think that it's so easy to come forward with like an allegation or an accusation or something.
Well, why are they not coming forward? So what's going on?
So there's clearly like issues that they, being different from us, that they can they feel differently about.
Well, 100%, they have to have them on and we're just working with like what we have, which is us, and that's what I got. Because I got you guys. Right?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying on like on a larger scale.
Yeah, on a larger scale. And the thing is that, and we're looking at it from a legal perspective, right? Which is, I guess, universal because that's just the law, right? And how would you prosecute? How would you go after someone? And what kind of evidence is? And that's all you can find is that the tawatur of the evidence. All right. So now you want to go on another topic now? Let's see what your salad boy wants to say here. Okay.
Is he still watching?
I don't know. I insulted him. So, do you believe Khabib's actions were an appropriate response to McGregor? I really don't know what. I didn't see it, so I didn't see it. But what did he do? He beat up some of these guys?
No. So basically, what the situation was, Conor McGregor is a major trash talker.
Yeah.
So in the entire lead up to the fight, Conor and his team, they insulting Khabib's family, his religion, all this kind of stuff. And like it's trash talk. It's not necessarily personal, but for a guy like Khabib, where he comes from, it's more like Joe Rogan actually said it when the commentator of the fight. He said his man, where the kind of person he is, for him it's about honor.
Yeah.
So he felt his honor was attacked, right, and repeatedly attacked, and he thought he had to take action. And later on, Khabib said it wasn't the best idea for him to do that.
Even his dad said the same thing.
So
see, the thing is, I viewed the whole thing of him going out and punching someone in the crowd.
I loved it.
I viewed that as great theater. That is so great. If I'm UFC, I'm happy, right?
Yeah, of course. UFC,
they're making money.
UFC always
they're not losing sleep over this.
Yeah. And okay, here's a question from Levon. Or a statement. He's saying gender segregation is an effect of morality. Okay, this also can be taken to extremes. Also in the society, gender segregation without the proper education and raising of morality can breed its own other deviant trends. Well, here's what I'm saying. There are two ways you can do gender segregation. You could do it completely segregated, which I think is going to be unhealthy because it's too odd, right? Or you could just casually separate, which means that if you have a gathering, the females are eating in one area and the males are eating in another, right?
But we're living in America and it's 2018 shit.
I mean, but that gender segregation is like, all right, it's not. There's nothing unnatural. There's nothing like if a non-Muslim walks in, because I always look at, let's say how we have an NBIC, I always want it to be that anyone could walk off the street, a random person, and a scholar could walk off the street. The person that comes off the street won't feel that this is so odd and bizarre, and the scholar at the same time will also not see any maharim happen, any haram things happening. So that's how I try to look at it, because you have to be almost seamless. I don't really believe. I think that's not healthy to have a completely different culture in your places of worship. And your home, your workplace, right? There needs to be some differences, obviously, but it should be somewhat seamless.
Yeah.
Okay. Murad says we have separate bathrooms. Well, not anymore. That's the problem, right? I mean, it's not. It's true. I mean, in some of the schools now, they have signs. I mean, you could use whatever bathroom you want, but obviously, I know what he's talking about, though. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Are we done? I think we're done. I don't think that anyone else has anything to say here. So, Hamza, you have anything to say?
No.
You good to go?
Yeah, I think I'm good to go.
All right. So I think we covered basically what we wanted to cover. And all right, here's our last question. Mahmoud Fatah says, Sheikh, if every accusation of rape without any substantial evidence should be taken seriously, then what's the protection of the Sharia for men? We're not like we said, we went over this, that filing a report is nothing other than a report. It's not a conviction. It's not an accusation, like legally speaking. It's an accusation from the victim side, but that's why we're saying it would take a lot. It would take repetition, right? If all you have is he said, she said, then all you have to make any form of accusation or conviction is repetition. So the way, is numbers. So the way forward is to find a system where you can gather these numbers, right? That's all we're saying. And like I said, well, how do you know that people aren't lying? Same thing, because you see that they're different.
Well, we have to have a system, right?
Yeah.
Like, it can't be like where nobody comes in and says anything. Like, we have a system in place where we can sift through what's true and what's not.
Yeah.
That's all we're saying here.
Yeah. All right. So Shabana says, how is a woman supposed to prove this? Okay.
Yeah.
What if it's just one person? That's the problem with sexual abuse, because the accusation of one person is not going to go anywhere in a court. That's the problem with sexual abuse. And that's why this idea of this proposed registry is to collect, because what I believe in, and I think it's pretty much true, is that anyone who does this sexual abuse is repeat.
Right.
They're all repeat. No one does something like that.
Yeah.
Crosses that barrier once. You always go back to it. If you get away with it, you go back to it. So,
and because they don't know each other, you can establish proof.
Yeah, and Murad is saying how many numbers? Well, you'll have to see that over time.
The definition of mutawatir is so many that it's impossible that it was
correct.
Allowed.
So it would be
it would be a case by case. So if it was just like, if it was two friends, well, it's possible that they conspired.
Correct.
But if it's two and one is from Jersey and one is from another place and they never had
it
contact,
elevates.
exactly.
It elevates
So
the
that changes. So mutawatir changes.
Yeah, it elevates the testimony. So you would have it almost be a case by case basis, because, like you said, 4 from 4 different parts of the country
Exactly.
is very different from 4 from the same place.
Or the same, yeah.
When the time is spread,
right,
it elevates. 4 from within one day is different from 4 over 10 years. 4 in one day, he could have been drunk that day. It doesn't change his guilt, right? But it elevates it, all right, if it's over time. So the answer to Murad is you'll figure that out based on other factors. You can't just pin it to a number, okay? It can't just be pinned to one number. Shabana says, so there would be a registry created for all men on earth. How does this work? Well, no, not on earth, but per country. I'm telling you, well, I mean, it is very feasible. We already have this registry. I mean, everyone is registered in the country that they live in, okay? And if we care about the issue, then you expend the money to do it, right? Don't we care about the issue? I mean, how many millions do we spend on defense? Yeah. I mean, so this is a violence on the inside of the country. You spend millions. This thing deserves millions of dollars, right, to protect people on the inside of the country. So we're not saying. So every country can do this, right?
Yeah, and the records already exist. Like
the record already exists.
It's the police report. When you apply for a job and they do a background check, that's what they're looking at, and so it already exists. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. So. I mean, someone says, don't know how I feel about more government. Well,
we're talking about in the context of like a
security
Sharia system.
You need security. I mean, you can't have no government at all. Or you can't have less government in every single way. So someone here is saying he doesn't know how he feels about more government. Well, then what do you propose? Yeah. Do nothing? Right? All right, Abdullah Smoody says, how do we balance and reconcile between the need for witnesses as per Islamic Sharia versus the modern methods of DNA and other methods? We did already address this, and we said that zina and rape are 2 different crimes. Right. That's the first thing. Okay, and in other crimes, secondary evidence is established as a source, and we gave the example of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Zina, we said, has to do with corrupting the public. So. We did mention it, but it's okay. We can mention it again. So the idea of sexual abuse being it has to be 4 witnesses, this is not the case. Crimes, a lot of crimes don't need 4 witnesses, right, to have viewed the crime. Okay.
And when you look in the fiqh books, ikhtisab is in a different category than zina.
Yeah.
I mean, one has a victim, and the other one is 2 people coming together. To do something, it's totally different.
It's a completely different crime. And sexual abuse is a completely different crime from zina. Yeah. Okay. Murad is saying, so it's statistical analysis. Yeah, there will be some statistical analysis. Just think about how hadith is. hadith is very much similar to this because it's testimony. For example, a young narrator, a child almost, taking from a senior sheikh, if they're both trustworthy, that one hadith by itself will still be suspect. If a reliable narrator took at the age of 6 years old from a sheikh who was at 90 years old, right? That link itself has commentary upon it, right, because of their ages. Okay, even if both of them are turned to in their prime, were completely trustworthy. So there is statistical analysis. There's age, there's distance, there's location, there's the time between accusations. So there's a lot of different things. And I'm telling you, we worry about the enemy from the outside. What about the enemy from the inside? So this thing does deserve to be almost like a wing, right, of whatever internal security. Like Homeland Security is a division that was created after 9/11, okay, to make sure that there is no terrorist attack happening on the land. Well, this thing, to me, it would seem to me, if I was running a country, let's say I was the king of a country, to have the people be secure in my country, that's my pride, right? So I would want them. I would spend what it needs to not have an epidemic like this happening, right? And yeah, there's going to be teaching on the inside, but from the outside, externally speaking, you're going to have. There has to be some kind of force, some kind of agency, something breathing down the neck of anyone who is accused of this, right? Until you find enough data to actually look at this, and like they say in America, they say, ask 100 people at the bar, right? You get enough data and you look at this, you're like, there's something going on here, right? There's something going on here. Because you look over time, you look people who don't know each other, and you look at this and you realize that something's going on, right? Khaled says, what if they're all influenced by feminism? I think due to the hyper ideology and partisanship that exists, government intervention may not work. It's got nothing else can enforce the law except the government. How would you deal with a verbal abuse? This is normally where it starts. What would you recommend for that? Verbal abuse, in terms of the perspective I'm looking at, which is the perspective of law and order, right? Speech, there are very few crimes, right? Speech has very few crimes, like slander. Which one is written? Libel is if it's in writing.
Yeah.
Slander, and then hate speech, right?
Even those, it's very hard to punish.
It's very hard to punish those. So I would say that, yeah, it does start at speech, but I don't think that the law can, because one of the proofs of that is that even in the Quran, is that we know the story that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was worshipping in his room, and then two men appeared behind him, two farmers. He turned around and he said, this is my partner, this is my neighbor, he has 99 animals, I have one animal. And then he yelled at me, right? And he berated me to give me the one animal, right? Then Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he judged immediately, and he said, he has wronged you by asking for the animal, right? And most associates these days are corrupt. And then all of a sudden they vanished and disappeared. Then Prophet Dawood realized that they're angels, they came to test him, and then he prostrated. And he made tawbah for that judgment. Why? Because it is not a crime to ask for a camel or an animal, right? It's not a crime. He made it instinctive, and he didn't ask the other person what happened. We learn a lot from this story, okay? He didn't ask what the accused what happened. Even if the guy says, yes, I did do that, where is the crime? Asking is not a crime. So now in Islam, yeah, we have things to say. In Sharia, in the sight of Allah, yeah, there are things to say about verbal abuse. However, the law cannot get into verbal abuse, and even where there is such accusations, it's very hard to prosecute.
Is there anything in the Sharia that about verbal abuse and what happens in that case?
What's that?
So from a Sharia perspective,
yeah,
is that something that would be like fined or anything, or is Is there any kalam on that? Or?
I've never heard that there's anything other than something but sin between you and Allah Ta'ala if you berate someone.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Some fair questions.
Yeah. Alright, so Khalid still wants no government. I have to think more on this. In a vacuum, I would love government to do what you propose, but fill in the drawing with color and context where we are. I have my doubts. Alright, I mean, trust me, you're going to see this idea.
I mean, I don't trust the U.S. government, so.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I don't even say the U.S. government anymore.
Yeah, we're just talking about a theoretical system.
Do you know how many branches of government are? Do you think like they're a monolith? It's like when someone says, "Oh, Muslims are this, Jews are that." Do you know the U.S. government is not monolithic, right? The U.S. government has composed of human beings, some of whom are ethical, some of whom are not, and many of whom are in the between, right? So just the idea of, in political discussion, to say the word the government, it really betrays ignorance, to be honest with you, right? Because there's so many millions and thousands of millions of people, and today's roll call of who works for the U.S. government in 10 years is going to be 70% different anyway, right? From the highest offices to the lowest offices in the U.S. government. So to me, I really think that anytime we say the U.S. government, the whole statement has to be thrown out. He says here, when we talk about Sharia, are we talking about a specific method? No. These are all... and most of these principles that we're talking about, they're derived from the principles of the muhaddithin.
Yeah.
Because the hadith scholars are the ones who had to deal with which testimony should we act upon. What hadith should we take action upon? So the principles that I'm looking at here, you mostly will find them in the books of Jarh wa Ta'dil. And the biographies of Jarh wa Ta'dil are so amazing because you read these biographies and then you find a point that is, sticks out.
Yeah.
Such as what I just said about someone who, an upright scholar who cites from another upright scholar. Both of them are completely upright, but the link of the two of them won't be accepted, right? Because of the age difference, for example. Things like that. All right, last question we'll take here is, how do you get rid of waswasa? You would just ignore it. Waswasa, and it may be psychological, may need to get treatment, psychological treatment, but in Sharia we just ignore it. We call it mustankah shak, someone who is literally connected or married to doubt or waswasa. Then at that point a person should just ignore it and continue his salah or wudu, but should ignore the waswasa. So let's stop here. Jazakumullahu khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Is that your phone?
I hope that caught everything.
I think we got it. I think we got some important things too. I hope the audio was good.
Yeah.